happiness into our school.
What a great problem that would be to have.
What a great problem.
I would really love to see what that would look like.
We are here today for podcast 2, and we're keeping on to kind of a similar theme in education for this talk like we did the last time. And today we're really fortunate. I recently came into contact with Brittany Singh. Brittany's new to Qatar, but she is really passionate about teacher wellness and well-being. And like compassion in schools, I consider this a conversation as a group of educators we need to be having. And Brittany engaged me immediately with her passion for wellness and well-being for teachers, and I thought this would be a good forum to get the conversation started here and, as widely as we can. So, Brittany, why don't you tell me a little bit more about yourself, tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and wellness and well-being.
I am teaching currently in Qatar, and I'm the grade level leader for first grade, have been teaching first grade. And I started this wellness initiative when I was in Shanghai in China. And I saw that the school had a vision for students to be healthy individuals. And yet for teachers, we didn't quite have this yet in our school. And I saw a need to bring this into light and to make this something that teachers were doing so that we could teach students through our actions. I've noticed that a lot of the times as we teach, what we teach is communicated through what we do.
Now, as we talk about this, can we differentiate what is health and what is well-being and wellness?
So well-being and happiness are often used interchangeably throughout research. And when you look at the research for happiness and well-being, you'll see different definitions, but subjective well-being is mostly on how we are feeling and how we identify ourselves as being happy or not feeling up to how we usually feel in some days, but it's consistent. And there's this current debate in research called the happiness pie of how much contributes to our happiness. And the most consistent research is about 50% genetics, 10% circumstance, and 40% volitional activity of what we choose to do. Mm-hmm. And so this is very telling in how our actions and our choices shape how happy we are and how well we are flourishing in wherever we are. And specifically for teachers, this is something that is just now, up and coming. It has been for a while, and now it's gaining more momentum, which is fantastic to see. And career well-being is so important, and in some research rated as the most important factor to our well-being because of how much time we spend at work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you on that. And the thing is with teacher well-being as well, and something that really resonated with me when I was looking at this after we had spoken, was the whole compassion fatigue that teachers feel because you're in an industry dealing with children where you see unfortunate circumstances or you see frustration, or as we talked about with compassion, you see children coming in who are so obsessed with their learning outcomes. Mm-hmm. We've kind of lost it a little bit there too, because here we are completely stressed out teaching these kids because there's so much pressure on being a teacher. Mm-hmm. So tell us more about the program then.
Part of what a wellness initiative looks like from what I have done is starting to introduce wellness language. And my goal is to create a culture where we can feel comfortable to talk about our mental well-being, to talk about our mental health, and to know what these terms mean. We started this podcast by talking about this definition, and it's really important for us to define what that means for ourselves and for our school. So before even starting a wellness initiative, looking at your school's mission statement and seeing where does this tie in? Is it already there? Dr. Gregory mentioned how he completely reshaped his mission statement to include compassion, and these are absolutely incredible measures that directors and administrators and leaders are taking to incorporate these factors into the mission statement. But even if it's not there directly, there will be something there that you can find and you can draw upon, and you can create a wellness community around something in the mission statement that will reside with you or whoever is founding the program.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So is it sustainable or is it personality driven? Do you need to have one person who's kind of driving it, or does it eventually become, I like the terms you use, language. Does it eventually become your school's language?
I think this is very dependent upon where you are and the support that you do have.
Yeah.
And how the longevity of how long you're going to be here.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, it is important to leave this in good hands, but it's also important to do what you can while you're there. Mm-hmm. And that's what I didn't know how long I was going to be in Shanghai. I didn't know what the circumstance was going to be, but I did know that I could do something while I was there. And if it was sustainable, that would be fantastic. But I would just wanted to start. And so I looked at how can I gain support for this before I begin.
Yep.
And one of the biggest areas that helped me was to look at our leaders at our school and see who was somebody who I think would buy into this and would be supportive. And I had, who's now a very dear friend of mine, but a curriculum director named Monica Utley, and she was always approachable, always kind, always helpful, always willing to go above and beyond her job. If she was a curriculum director, she would step in to substitute for classes so that other teachers could observe. Mm-hmm. And she was the type of person who embodied what kindness looks like, what well-being looks like, somebody who loves themselves, what that looks like. And so I reached out to her, told her my ideas, and she was so encouraged me to just start and just form this committee. Okay. So I worked with one other teacher. He was a PE teacher at the time, and he and I sat down, we started this committee, and we reached out to teachers to see who is interested in starting some programs, teaching some classes. Okay. What are their passions? Because when you tap into teachers' passions, it's infectious.
Well, at that point, you've got buy-in too. So can you tell me what your ideas were when you sat with her? Can you literally walk me through what that conversation was? Because a lot of people won't know where to start. Because one of the things with teacher wellness is that right now, we keep adding to our curriculum. Any new thing the environment, for example, now becomes a part of the curriculum. In Qatar history now had to be. So we're adding all this work onto our teachers at the same time saying, and by the way, you're going to be doing testing, you're going to be doing mapping, and we're looking at the math and the science. And this is where stress is born. And this is where teachers become disheartened and start losing their passion and start burning out. So when you sat and talked to her, are those things that you brought up, or did you just launch right into this is my idea and this is what I want to do? Because I'd love to hear the conversation you had so people can kind of, relate to that and have that talk at their schools.
I started with, there's a appreciative inquiry focus, right? Where you look at what is going right, what is going well with the school, what are the strengths that you already have. And like I mentioned before, in Shanghai, we did have this.
I love that word. It was appreciative inquiry.
Appreciative inquiry. It's a strategy that a lot of schools, there's a school in Chennai, American International School of Chennai, and they just used this appreciative inquiry model to look into their school, and they completely revamped their mission statement, their vision statement to include well-being in all of this, and it's incredible. But even for just a wellness program, you can start with what's right and look at what is going well for your school. Like you said, there are so many factors, but there are some things that are going very well already that you can tap into. And once you know what's going right, then you need to look at how are you going to make this accessible to people? How are you going to, create the conditions to get people motivated? Because motivation is very difficult to procure, but you can create conditions to foster motivation. So you look at, competency, how to foster competency, how to foster the autonomy of people. How relatable is the program going to be? What is the purpose of this program? And where is the play in this as well? Where is the fun and the social connections? Because when you look at well-being, social relationships are a huge indicator of how well somebody is flourishing or not flourishing. And these, relationships are so important. And when we are able to get teachers up to this level of happiness, it's incredible, the effects that are a domino effect, and it directly affects our students. Because when you compare, in the research, there's comparisons of happy people to less happy people. And like I mentioned before, it's important to look at the researcher's definition of what happiness is.
Definitely.
But even, generally, looking at less happy to more happy people, you see in happy people better task persistence. You see better performance evaluations at work. You see that they have better athletic performance, better work performance, that they are able to handle challenges and be more creative, and that positive brains are functioning at a higher level than negative, neutral, or stress brains.
So tell me about the program then. So you sat with excuse me, what
Monica.
You sat with
Yes.
Monica, and then how did the program look for your school?
We didn't know at first,
Okay.
and we just took a dive in and started, like I said, we reached out to teachers who was interested in leading some activity. We didn't know what to call them yet. We just said some activity. And we had a teacher who volunteered to teach yoga classes. We had another teacher who volunteered to lead a mindfulness session. And then I had my husband, he volunteered to lead an Indian dance class. And this was really powerful because it showed the community of international teachers. We had an Indian teacher who was teaching an Indian dance class. And when you looked at the people in the class, we were from all different places in the world. And we were all learning this style of dance. And I think for international schools specifically, to tap into the fact that we all come from different places. And it doesn't need to be anything specific. It can be whatever that person wants to share about their culture, whatever they want to share. So we have these teachers start these programs, start these classes, and they were once a week.
Okay.
And then we looked at how many people are coming, what's popular, what's going well, what can we make better. And then we noticed, okay, this class should be twice a week. This class should go down to maybe once every 2 weeks. And then we, formatted it from there. We also did whole school initiatives. And we tried to really ingrain wellness in the language of our school as well and make it visible. Mm-hmm. So I started making posters around our school of growth mindset, of these really exciting principles that can be incorporated into our teaching, but also into how we live our lives. And I would put quotes up in the teacher's lounge that were encouraging and uplifting quotes just to make somebody feel appreciated that day. We started paying forward gratitude to teachers, and I led one section about the importance of just a simple thank you to somebody and how that changes somebody's day. And here in Qatar, we did this right before Thanksgiving. We had an opportunity to do a little presentation. And so what we did is we opened the floor to the teachers. We had one microphone, and we just passed it around to people who were interested. And they just shared about somebody who had affected them in a positive way, or someone who had helped them. And it was incredible to hear teachers tell someone who's sitting, a few rows down in a completely different division, something that they had done that affected them and that they were grateful. And just paying forward gratitude is very simple but very effective, because you'll often hear people talk about, oh, this person has no idea how much this affected me, or this teacher has no idea when I stopped by their room, I was inspired by their layout. And these are things we need to tell people, because once they realize that, they will be able to be encouraged for what they're doing.
How do you sit and have that discussion with your entire community that this is something we now value? We realize we talk about learning outcomes, but now we're going to talk about valuing our teachers, valuing their mental health, and valuing their well-being.
I think that this starts with seeing where you can incorporate this a little bit sneakily into staff meetings.
Absolutely, this is good. That's a good point. So staff meeting, did you do that in China?
So in China, when we had agendas set out for the whole faculty, wellness would request, can we have 10 minutes? Can we have 15 minutes? Usually it was 5 minutes, and that was okay. And we did what we could with that time. But, we would introduce the new classes that we were doing, or maybe we would do a brief mindfulness activity with the whole staff while we have the whole staff there, and increase the exposure to what we are doing. And just try as often as possible to make this normalized, so that, like I said, this culture, that it's okay to talk about yourself, and that it's okay for teachers to take time for themselves. Because like you said, time is so valuable, and it's something that is such a big commodity. And when people invest their time in something, there is a purpose and there's a reason that they're doing it. And if teachers don't buy into this right away, they're not going to want to invest their time. So how do you get them to be encouraged? You have to sneak it in there. You have to get them to do it without realizing that they're doing it. And then all of a sudden, maybe they realize that was really helpful, that I just did slow breathing. Whatever the activity is, your intention will be there. And something as simple as gratitude, that doesn't need to be a whole staff event. That can be you starting an email trend, or there's the CEO, Chip Conley, and he devised this system where at the end of every meeting with the whole staff, he would give 1 minute. I think he did at the beginning of the meetings, and he would do 1 minute where somebody just talks about somebody. It can be a janitor, somebody who works in the school, another staff member, and they just talk, and they talk about how this person has had a positive impact on them. And someone else in the meeting will take notes on what this person is saying, and then that person will deliver the message to the other person. The person who took the notes about it would say, in our meeting today, you came up and someone was talking about you, and these are all the things that they noticed that you are doing.
I think that's a great idea. What's sort of the light at the end of the tunnel? Because I think we can agree that any school will find this difficult at first. Any person will find it difficult at first. But like I had discussed with Greg, we all start somewhere.
We were talking earlier about Brene Brown.
Yes.
Right? And Brene Brown does this amazing talks, has amazing books, and she talks about being vulnerable and being able to dare greatly and be daring and be able to know that when you are courageous, you will fail and it will be difficult and it might not last and it might not be sustainable and it probably won't work the first time. And you're probably going to have classes that don't work. I was talking to a school in Doha, and they had, a new teacher take on a program, and they were so excited that this new teacher had stepped up, and then nobody came. But that's okay, because then you learn a little bit as you go. Every time you make a failure, you learn a little bit more about, okay, what are we going to do a little bit differently next time?
I'm really happy you brought that up too. That's a growth mindset as well, isn't it?
Yes.
That failure is actually learning in disguise. And we need to bring it to a point that wellness and well-being is a consistent, constant discussion. It starts somewhere. So I'm glad you brought up that failure is okay, because even if the program fails, it's okay. You can try again. And even if you only get one person.
Exactly.
You have changed the life of one person who is in turn changing the lives of their classroom full of kids.
And this is a ripple effect, right? It's going to ripple outward.
Yes.
And even if you have 5 people in a class, that is okay. And you are doing this because you care. You're not doing this for money. You're not doing this for recognition. You're doing this because you care.
Specifically, what would you do? What kind of practical tips could you give if you were interested in bringing this into your school or your community? Who do you get buy-in from first, admin or teachers, and what do you do with each one of those groups?
I would say start with who you think will be the most supportive. If you feel the teachers are going to buy in more, start with the teachers. If you have, like I did in Shanghai, an administrator who will be helpful and who you know that they will support you, ask them first. And also, reach out to other people who have done this before.
I agree completely. And by the way, we will have the address available to get in touch with Brittany so that we can create this conversation, and there will be someone you can reach out to. Obviously, we'd love to cover everything, but we can't always. But we will have a way to get in touch with Brittany.
And this is something I'm consistently growing in. Every time I see any mentioning of well-being or happiness or compassion or any of these traits, I am immediately looking, who can I talk to at this school? Who can I get more information from? How can I make our program better? How can I make this more global as well?
Well, that was my next question. So can't we develop a program of well-being? Even if your school doesn't embrace it, that doesn't mean you can't be a part of a teacher well-being community. I think that might be a way to make it work here. Just because your school won't have it. So is that something we could kind of talk about at one point too? Maybe growing a teacher well-being council, for lack of a better word, for CATCHA or wherever it is that you are. So do you feel like those strategies would work?
Definitely. And when you have people on board who care and they want to be there, that's always a great place to start.
You're creating a movement. You are creating a movement who then can go, everybody likes safety in numbers. No one wants to be the first one. And oftentimes, the second person's more important than the leading person, because that second person means you have buy-in. And all of a sudden you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that was another thing. Would you recommend that possibly as something to make it happen?
Definitely. And I think that this is something that hopefully will be fluid and continuing, as this conversation develops. And also the directors and administrators who do want to get on board and who do want to do these things, being able to appreciate them and let them help you, because you will find people who when you speak to them, you won't know what their title is. You don't know what position that they have, because they are approachable, they are kind, they care about what they're doing, and they model and emulate these things that you are looking for. So I would say when you are starting a program like this, look for these people, because they are all around you. It might be somebody who's not a teacher. It might be somebody who is an assistant. It might be somebody who works at reception. But there are people at every school, at every workplace, who are flourishing, who take the time for themselves, who take the time to first be compassionate to themselves and develop the skills and talents that they do have, so that their gift is greater to other people. And they are the people that you want with you, because it's infectious. When you have people who care, when you have people, who embody these things, it's infectious. And especially if it's somebody who's in leadership, because then it's something that they are promoting through just living their life. When you have an administrator and every time you see them, they have, carrots, or they have nuts in their pocket, or they're, snacking on something healthy, or you see them walking outside instead of, walking the stairs instead of taking the elevator. And when they're walking in the hallways, their face is up, they're looking at you, they're smiling at students, and they are approachable, and they are generally having a positive disposition. These are people who know these concepts, and who maybe they don't know exactly that they're doing these things, but they are doing the things that you want to promote in your school. And these people need to be spotlighted. This recognition is so important, because they are the people that other people can learn from and see what this looks like.
So they'd be
in
the
daily
champions.
Life. Yes.
They would be those champions that you would then, kind of bring in and seek out. So if you were starting the first thing you do, look for others, or for people who can, even if it's, putting something out with, what do you do? What can you offer? Can you offer something to do this?
And see what teachers want to do. See what they want to offer. And one thing that we are changing in our program now is another thing that's very important for international schools is know your culture. What is working in your culture? And how, like you mentioned before, how can you connect to the community? In Shanghai, when we did boot camps, we would do them outside. And I had so many parents come up to us like, can you please lead this for our kids? Like, we would love our kids to do this. Like, who are you working at the school? And just build this conversation, again, about creating this culture.
Absolutely. And it's creating conversations. We are creating conversation. Everybody feels better when they feel heard as well.
And if something is not working, then try something else. Some of our classes, we started with 1 hour. That was not successful. And so we started with 45 minutes. That was a little bit better. We switched it to 30 minutes, more participation, more people. And then when you do have people, we had some people from administration who came, or people who were not teachers who came. We highlight them. We talk to them in the hallways. I'm so glad that I saw you at our class today. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. We have posters in the hallways of when our classes are, what the schedule looks like. We have sign-up sheets for some of them. Some of them are just show up when you would like to show up. And making people feel, back to the autonomy, the competency, the, relatedness and the readiness. See how ready people are for this. If they're not ready yet, you have to sneak it in. Get it in there somehow, get them to try it. And then if those times are not working, one thing I'm going to try this new school year is 15 minutes at the beginning of the day of mindfulness, or of gratitude, or of something that's just 15 minutes. Because if you can get those 15 minutes and you can get teachers to start that, then maybe it will expand more. And if it doesn't, then that's okay. That's 15 minutes that somebody just took to spend time on themselves that they normally would not have taken. And so use those and understand the culture that you're in, because they are very different. The things that I would do in Shanghai, some of them I wouldn't be able to do here, and vice versa. And that's what makes this part of being an international educator, that you are a lifelong learner,
and
that you get to learn
these things.
Exciting.
It's what makes the journey exciting. So I guess flexibility is probably the most important takeaway when you're looking at a wellness and well-being program. You need to be flexible. And language. I think we can agree that language is probably really important, and having the school move towards a positive linguistic style.
And perseverance as well.
Perseverance.
We talked about Brene Brown briefly,
Yes,
but she talks
yes.
about how be mindful of the criticisms that you take and who they're coming from, because you will get criticisms. And we
course.
have surveys that go out to see, how is this going? Do you like this? And majority of the negative responses that we receive, even if it's anonymous, I know who they came from, and I know that they're not people who are participating in our program. So if they're not even trying, those aren't the people that
But you can
still want to
disregard
reach
those.
them, and you want to find a way that you can get them in, but try not to take it personally, because
Oh, that's a good
look
point.
at the good and take in the ones that are helping you, and the people who do care, because those are the people that you are reaching and that you're helping them build
Yeah.
up. And the other ones, brainstorm, try to find ways to get them there, but if they're not the ones that are being brave and trying these things in the first place, then you can let their critiques kind of fall by the wayside.
Exactly. Which you have to.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to have an opinion. That's just the
Of
way
course.
it's being brave enough to face it and think, oh, if it's not good for you, it is good for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Brittany, as we close up, is there anything you'd like to add about what we talked about today?
Yes. If you are watching this and you are a parent or a student or a teacher, whatever your role is, just know to believe in yourself and believe in your capabilities, and remember that you are always stronger than you think you are. And if no one has told you that they believe in you, I am the messenger to tell you that I believe in you and you can do this, and be brave.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. That was perfect. Nice way to end.
20 seconds?
Yeah. You probably
Okay.
still had more. Oh, good girl. There you go.
Oh, yay.